Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you all. So great. We have a lot of attendees here. So we're going to get started. Thanks for joining us. So this is the University of Oregon Career Futures Art and Technology panel. And I'll talk a little bit about our esteemed guests here in a minute. But I'd like to start and take a moment to recognize that the land that the University of Oregon uses to live and work in is the occupied territory of the Kalapuya people. And with today's gathering and the work we do here daily, we acknowledge our occupation and pay respect to the Kalapuya people and the Confederate tribes of the Grand Ronde as the past, present, and future stewards of this land. I'd also like to say that this is being recorded, just so you know, and that the Q&A is open, and we'll kind of have a series of kind of 5 prompts that kind of will direct the conversation for the first 45 minutes to an hour. But if you can, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A portion, and we'll kind of take those in and spend the last half hour, 45 minutes talking about your questions. And we'll have the chat also open, and that's active if you want to kind of, we'll be dropping links to the artists and designers and other things there, so you can kind of follow the conversation there too. One other announcement here is that Adam Paikowski, who is a creative technologist who was also an alumni, will be doing kind of an open drop-in, like Ask Me Anything session at 3:30, and we can drop the link in that in the Zoom here in a minute here, so you're able. There you go, and you can. I'll drop Adam's website too, so you can kind of surf that a little bit and see some of Adam's work. He's a New York-based creative technologist doing a lot of installation and kind of like projection mapping, those kind of things, 3D. Anyways, great. So we're going to welcome our guests, and they'll kind of introduce themselves and show a project and talk about themselves. I've been super lucky to have all 3 of these students as these 3 artists and as a student of mine in my classes, and have kept up with them a little bit throughout the years, and I'm just excited. It feels like so great to have this awesome group of folks here. And I should also say it's kind of interesting the way this kind of came together, because they do kind of in some way represent the 3 areas that we talk about in art and technology, with Carly, definitely leaning into the creative programming and the work that they're doing, Nico with the video editing focus and the work they're doing, and then also Mary with more animation, illustration. And so it's a nice pairing of these folks here. And I should say, like, the loose theme here is transitioning from school to professional career. And it's kind of interesting that you're kind of just far enough, you're like in kind of the beginning of your creative careers, and far enough from school, you have this kind of interesting perspective there that you can share with our seniors and juniors that are kind of nervously looking at their graduation dates. So we'll get started here. If that sounds good. And so the first kind of prompt question here is, what year did you graduate and what was your focus? Whether, and I already talked a little bit about that, but maybe what you're doing now isn't necessarily what you're doing in school. And if you could, either, I think we're talking about maybe screen sharing, you could also drop a link, and we'll kind of just take turns here. So whoever wants to go first can jump on in. Or should I prompt?
Mary, go.
I'll go first. Okay. Hi, my name is Mary Vertulfo. I graduated in 2018 from the BFA program. There's my bio. I can just read that off. But I am a motion designer / illustrator / animator right now in Portland at a studio called Hovercraft. I do a lot of storyboarding. I do a lot of freelance on the side, more like creative fun projects for myself. And I'm going to share I put together a reel very last minute because I wanted to share the most up-to-date stuff. So I'm going to share a work in progress reel with all of y'all. Okay, you can see this? Good. Cool.
Whoa, kill it. Yeah, your ass step, but you a whack attack. See the money, you can't
You hoes can't pull it off like me. Talk like me, bet you wanna be the boss like me. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. That's the latest. That's the latest I have. But yeah, I do a lot of illustration, animation, cell animation, 2D motion graphics, and I love it. So I'm going to pass the ball to Nico.
Awesome. Really awesome work, Mary. My name is Nico Toll, and I graduated in 2014. My focus at school was mainly in the video art realm, although was kind of all over the map in terms of where I was focusing in the digital arts zone. And nowadays I'm a freelance video editor, mainly focusing on the commercial video and branded content space. And I have a reel to share of some of my recent work. Awesome.
Great, thanks. I know the videos are coming across a little laggy, so I also recommend you go to the artist sites and check out if you want to follow up as well too.
Hi, I'm Carly. I graduated with a BFA in 2017, and my focus was on code art and creative programming. And now I work for a studio called Upswell in Portland, which is a experience design studio. So I work on exhibit designs, mostly, at least before the pandemic, mostly on touchscreen applications. Just I'll share my screen real quick. So we work for everything from places like, most coolly, the Library of Congress was a very cool place to work, for their exhibit on the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. This was a touchscreen application that I wrote. We also do a lot of scientific communication type stuff. So for example, we helped design a space in Maine for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, which educates the public about, educates the public about the scientific method and different research that's going on there. There's a whole panorama in there, and I programmed these touch screens. One project I actually just finished up is, I actually did pull a program up, this is a project that is, this is on the very technical side of different methodologies of managing fisheries populations. So this is going to be on a touch screen in Maine once everything is opened up. So this is just a data visualization project that was fascinating to work on. So I work with all different types of people, from designers and art museums to research scientists, studying fish populations. So that's what I do.
Great, thanks, awesome. It's something that you've already maybe touched a little bit on, but maybe we could also talk about, like, how where you ended up now, and whether like you were at a school you kind of found your place, or whether you kind of took a few different steps to get where you're at now, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that trajectory as well.
Yeah, so I feel like when I was in school, I had a really specific idea of what I wanted to do, and I know that's not always super common. I just, like, during my time at school, I kind of narrowed in on a specific type of work I wanted to do, which is mainly illustration and design for motion, and also doing animation and motion on its, as a secondary supportive media to that. So I kind of tailored all my work in college to learn how to do that type of thing. And then when I graduated, I got brought on at a small studio as a motion designer. So I wasn't animating so much, but I was illustrating, doing style frames. And as my career has progressed, I've been able to bounce between being an animator, being a designer, doing illustration work. So I feel like I've had a pretty cut and dry path. But I know that's not always super common, and maybe not the most interesting, but I really enjoyed being able to do a deep dive on what I love to do the most. And so far I haven't strayed, but hopefully soon I'll kind of extend my wings a little bit.
Could you also talk about, like, did you do an internship, or did you or how did you, and also, like, you kind of bounced around a little bit too, like as far as like companies and such. I don't know if
Oh, as far as companies go, yes, I did actually bounce around a lot. I had one trajectory, but when I was in college, I did a lot of drawing workshops outside of the U of O as well. So I didn't have any summer internships, but I was traveling and doing a lot of drawing lessons and animation kind of programs secondary to school. And then when I graduated, I had my first job as a junior. So I was brought on on a contract basis to my first studio until it was clear that our working relationship was going to be beneficial for both sides. And then I started full-time there. And shortly after I worked at that studio, they actually folded. And I went freelance for a few months, and it was like the scariest few months of my life. But I got to go down to Buck in LA and work there, and they were just a dream studio for me. So I freelanced as a designer there for some TV, which was really fun. Working in a studio with hundreds of people is so different than working in a studio with like a dozen people. And then I got brought on as a motion designer at my current job. So I'm doing more After Effects animation, not as much illustration. And I'm kind of, getting better at working in different types of animation that I'm not as confident in. So I'm actually doing a lot of learning right now, which is really great. But that studio is really small, and everyone in it has really specific skill sets. So we're all able to collaborate a lot, and everyone has kind of a heavy hand in the work we make. So.
Yeah, I've had a very different experience from Barry, in that I don't have a specific interest or skill set. It has been such a journey to figure out what I am into. I changed my major a bunch. I ended up getting a BFA in art and technology, but also double minored in computer science and sociology, which turned out to be the perfect degree combination for what I do now, because it's takes a lot of both, obviously thinking about technology and design, but also just a lot of thinking about people and how a lot of UX thinking, which is not something I had a lot of experience with. But I kind of struggled with fitting in my creative side with my programming side for a while and trying to make those two fit together, which is of course very silly. They can go hand in hand easily. But in terms of actually getting a job, I was super, super lucky in that I found Upswell because one of the partners there actually went to U of O, and he was in the art and technology program when it was called digital arts, I believe, or possibly a name before that, I don't remember. But Kyron Lin was in the program, and so I got an internship there before I graduated, like the year before my super senior year, because I was a 5th year student. And then I worked part-time until I graduated, and I was lucky enough to get a job right after. And that situation is really unusual. So I feel super blessed to be in that situation.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. My story is maybe a little combo of the two. In college, I was diverse in kind of going in the 3 different prongs of, I was in digital arts then. Towards the end, I started to focus more and more on video work, and actually connected with Rick and our shared love of action sports. As you can tell through my reel, that's definitely where I focused predominantly in the beginning of my career. And created some portfolio pieces around that space. And that really was the trajectory since then. Definitely utilize all my skill sets that I gained from digital arts, not just in video editing. A lot of stuff comes into play, which is cool. But out of college, yeah, I just knew that I wanted to work in the film industry. The action sports film industry was my goal. And I didn't really know how I was going to fit. I had a lot of different skill sets. I could shoot, I could edit, but at a rudimentary level, in the sense that I had never worked professionally. And I had like 2 contacts in Portland that worked in some form of the video industry. And I always say that I'm a part-time video editor and a full-time networker. Being freelance, that's definitely the nature of the beast. I love it though, because I am a people person, and definitely as a freelancer, it's really about connecting the dots multiple times with people. And so I moved from Eugene to Portland, and from those 2 contacts, got another 2 contacts and another 2 contacts and another 2 contacts. And for a while, I was like just having meetings and feeling kind of down, in the sense that it wasn't leading to jobs right away. But I was open to what I could do, in the sense that I wasn't telling someone I'm going to be a video editor, which kind of frustrated people, I think, for a while, because they wanted to put me in a box, and they wanted to say like, I want to hire Nico as this. But I wanted to be open and experience different things. And so I dabbled in production, being a PA, a production assistant, and on smaller minimal shoots doing like AC work, which would be assistant camera work. And that was definitely a way that I started to meet people. And then slowly people found out that I could edit, and that I liked to edit, and then I had some skill in it. And I started to get hired in that realm. And it's definitely fits and starts. And I worked here and there at different agencies, different production companies, or directly with companies. In Portland, you have a ton of action sports companies up there that hire people directly for specific projects. And yeah, also worked on contract, more longer term contracts as well. And have found myself now at a space that I'm kind of maybe diverging a bit away from action sports. I still love action sports, but looking towards telling more stories, and yeah, that's the future.
Great, thanks, y'all. Okay, let's go to the past a little bit here. So back to school. What was an important lesson, idea, and or approach that you learned at UO? And it could be in art and tech, but it could be however you want to interpret it, that has helped you in your career so far.
I guess I'll unless Carly go Carly.
Okay, I'll go. But only because you insisted. So one thing that I learned was, especially because I took a lot of like computer science classes, and I also did a lot of programming in art classes, and now I'm programming in like the design world. It's interesting to compare how the two prepared me for that kind of work, because the computer science classes gave me really good building blocks, but actually in terms of process, the art classes kind of prepared me better, because in computer science classes, they give you problem sets and like really defined problems. And in the real world, at least in the kind of work I do, it's very open-ended. So there's a lot more creativity that goes into like my day-to-day like programming that I really wasn't expecting. For a while, I didn't think I would ever become a programmer because of my experience in programming classes. I assumed it would just be like that, but really it was a lot more like my art classes where, you know, there's not a specific problem to solve. You have to figure out what the problem is first. Yeah, thanks, art and tech.
Okay, I have an answer I'm very passionate about for this one. I hope it will be very helpful to everyone. But I was actually just recently talking to another current art and tech student about this. And it's that you should be an incredible critic to your own work and look at all your work as if you were your own client trying to solve your own goal or trying to send a specific message. And I think this is helpful in school and in professional work. Like when you bring work to a critique, you want to have looked at it really thoroughly, looked at it from every angle. So when you walk into that critique, you're able to defend the work as best you can. You, in your mind, maybe it has like, no flaws because it's exactly what you wanted it to be. It's the best you could have done it. And so when you walk into critique, your teacher is not able to say, oh, did you think about this? Because you will said yes. And I decided to do it a different way because of this. So I think to be able to defend your work is really important. And when you enter the professional world, professionals, or I guess like wherever you're working, they're not going to want to be nitpicking you over like little things that you haven't thought about, you haven't caught. It's best to be able to walk in the door and say, I've thought about this like in every possible way, so that it's extremely, that the work you're making is really tight. So that when they do give you critique and they do offer you a new point of view, you're learning from that. You're not just saying, oh yeah, I thought about that, but I didn't do it. Or yeah, I thought about that, but I didn't have time. I think to really go through the process of self-critique on your own work is really important, because it will push you to be the best artist and creative you can be. And then it'll give you the opportunity to learn from everyone around you, whether that's in school or other professionals you're working with.
Yeah, I have a very similar vein of what I learned at U of O. And it's kind of maybe a trick to get to that place that Mary's talking about, Whenever I made work, I tried to make it as if I was gonna hang it on my own wall. So if I was gonna wake up every morning and see this video that I was creating, or in some illustration, I tried to be right with it in myself before I brought it to the critique space. So within that is right within it in myself is does it speak to me? Am I speaking through it? Have I thought about all the angles that I could approach this? And then in the critique space is like you're able to defend and own the work. But I always tried to think like I'm coming up with ideas for a project at school, and it's like, oh, maybe I could do that, maybe I don't know. But until I was like, oh, I want to look at that every day, I didn't like pursue. I mean, I would dabble with them maybe just to keep the creative juices going, but it was definitely kind of the litmus is like, do I want to hang this on my own wall? Do I want to share it? And do I want to be behind it? Yeah.
Interesting how all three of you have this kind of appreciation for the criticality or the conceptual part. You know, not that the technical part is just as important, but that's like what you deal in your day-to-day life is not necessarily like getting the latest. I mean, I guess that's probably still, or maybe you could talk about that, like how that balances out, like knowing the latest texts, or like how the technology you learn and how that versus like, you know, versus the critical kind of part.
Yeah, I think having solid ideas, having thought about it from a lot of different angles, having tested things, and having it like a really well-formed concept speaks more, I've found, in my world, than like, oh yeah, like I can do the coolest editing flips and tricks, you know. That does have its space. But as a video editor, I'm trying to tell a story and it has to be really solid. And so I think that like building my tool of conceptualizing and honing in on concept within the degree has been a key bridge to where I'm at now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Carly. I mean, I agree. I think like the tools, the classes you're taking in art and tech, they're vehicles to get you to your destination, which is to make a cool piece of work or work that is inspiring or that you love. And I think that, you know, part of my job, my day-to-day job is downloading plugins and learning to use After Effects plugins. And I didn't realize how much I would rely on like, you know, other people's built code to do what I want to do. But anyone can learn how to use a plugin, and anyone can, you know, watch YouTube tutorials on After Effects, but not everyone can can tell stories and think about, you know, and be self-critical and be open to learning and critiquing your own work and trying to push their own work. So I think that what makes the job like interesting and what makes my work, you know, what potentially makes me valuable as an employee is that I am willing to look past all the you know, the new technical things that are coming out and all the programs and everything, and get to the idea and like get the emotion across or get the art across.
Yeah, ditto to everything just said. Like I'm learning technical things on the job all the time. So much of what I do, so many of the languages I write in, I didn't know before starting the job. But it's all processes I was familiar with because of my experience with making art. So agree with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks. You might have already touched on this question already too, but I'm gonna say it anyways because it's on the list here. What's something you wish you would have known as you entered the job market?
I can take.
And there was also a question about portfolios in the Q&A, so maybe that like it ties. That was one of the first questions. The best way to put together a portfolio. So maybe that's kind of a tie-in there. Key aspects that employers look for. I'm not sure.
Do you want me to talk about this first question, or I did?
Sorry, yeah, sure. We can get to the Q&As too later too.
Oh, I see. Oh, that was part of it. I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I would always try and come to the critiques at school with a really solid concept, feeling really good about my work, personally, really behind it and proud of it. And in the critiques at school, the feedback rounds are awesome and inspiring, and it's a great dialogue between the students and the teacher. And what I wish I had known is that in the professional world, when those dialogues are happening between in a critique between a client and myself, sometimes it's communication and dialogue and back and forth in what I would call collaboration, and sometimes it's direct feedback to change X, Y, Z, and W. And I wish I had known how to have a lighter heart about that when hearing harsh feedback or demanding feedback in tone. Yeah, I wish I had known how to separate myself from my work, because I'm proud of that piece. You know, when I show up with a first round to show my client, I'm like, we're there. And granted, you know, let's push it as far as we can, but it is hard when someone says change it all or change X, Y, and Z. It feels like I have a hard time separating myself from my work. So remembering, I wish I had known how to, not let feedback like that be a reflection of my value as an artist or my worth as a human even. And how to turn those communication moments into like really positive collaboration as opposed to like self-destructive moments.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I feel like one of the hardest things for me when I started working in the professional sphere is people would be like, you use too much color, or like you use too much, like you just want to put all the cute girls in the animation and we can't do that. And I'm just like, wow, what do you have against me? And they're like, no, we're trying to think like the client it is trying to make something really neutral, like really kind of boring, and you just need to like tone it back. And when I started making work in a professional setting versus work for myself, which is what I did in college, it was really hard to kind of let my art be taken into the hands of a client, because I was making work for them. They were paying me to do it. And so I think it was really hard for myself to like change my idea of what defined me as an artist. And it was really important for me to continue making work outside of my professional work, so that my creativity wasn't only coming through the lens of client work. And I still try to do that a lot, but that's one thing that was like really hard for me to face, and I still struggle with today, because like I said, I'm a huge defender of my own work. So I'll go into a client meeting, I'll be like, this is the best thing for you, best thing for your consumers, this is it. And they will be like, no, this is nothing like we want, nothing what we asked for, not our taste. And I just have to let some things go.
Yeah, going off that a little bit, one thing I wasn't, there's a kind of a dance that happens with like, how do we encourage the client to take this approach when like they might not realize that's the best approach, which is a skill into itself. And it's fascinating that people have that. I don't. But on a completely different note, one thing that I wasn't prepared for, I knew that I was about to learn a ton of new skills jumping into the professional world. One thing that was kind of a shock was just the amount of like time management, like organizational software, the amount of acronyms in the workplace, just as soon as I entered that world, I felt like I didn't know what anyone was saying. Like all the clients had like nicknames. People were talking about different accounts, and it just took me a while to figure out like kind of the language and all the like processes that went into projects, because the core process was like very similar to what I was familiar with, but like a lot of the details of like, you have to write a ticket in Jira to do this. What's Jira? I have to estimate the time for it. How do I estimate time? Oh God, that sounds horrible. And that's a skill unto itself, apparently. Like that sort of finicky stuff, I had a lot of trouble getting used to. And I found that was like a bigger chore than a lot of the work itself. And that took a while for that not to be a stressor, as opposed to like actually something that's really helpful that like actually, you know, does what it's supposed to, and you know, helps with the flow of the workplace when everyone is able to use it. So I think that depends on how you react to different organizational systems. I'm a little bit slow to learn them, but that was a shock for sure.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just to tag on to that, and it kind of goes broad, but it's also smaller. Is I was going to say, I wish I had known, and I don't know who would have told me this, but that it's okay not to know either things like what Carly was talking about, of like not to know jargon or specific things, and you know, I would hope that I and you and everyone on the panel finds themselves in situations where it's okay to ask and learn, and those are the kind of collaborative settings that are worth finding and sticking with. But also it's okay not to know on a broader sense. Like I didn't really know how to get into what I wanted to. I didn't really know if I was going to be into it. I had an inkling and I had those two contacts, and I just took a step forward. And I think reminding myself that it's okay, I don't know where this step is going, but this step is valuable in the sense that maybe it's going to feel icky and I'm going to sidestep or I'm going to step backwards. But maybe it's going to feel great and I'm going to take another step. And each step has value, even if you don't know where it's going, or even if you don't know if that's the direction you want to go in. And some of the hardest working environments that I've been in, or the projects that didn't feel good or whatever, have taught me a lot, and have continued to build my confidence. And so it's okay not to know.
Great, thanks. What are some changes that you've kind of seen happening in your field or your careers currently? And that could be, you know, as broad or as minute as you want to go here.
I think for me, it's hard for me to tell if it's like a change or just if it's always been this way, because I am only 3 years into my career. But I guess something that is different from what I expected it to be. So like a change that happened in my mind and kind of forced me to change my skill set as I was working, was that I assumed that people wanted, well, okay, I know this for a fact. When I applied to jobs right after school, I had an interview that just went terrible. And the person said, I would never hire you. I tell the story all the time. I would never hire you. Your illustrations are so bad. You look like your work looks like it was made by a toddler. And if I want to hire an animator, I'm just going to hire them from the animation school because they'll do way better than you could do. And I was so like upset that they would not recognize all my potential and all my skill. So I assumed that people wanted someone who was like insanely technically skilled at one thing. And when I found a job that valued me for my interdisciplinary approach to animation, the fact that I wanted to know how to tell stories, I wanted to be able to storyboard and design and animate, I wanted to do all those things. And if I was, you know, I would maybe need a little more time to do animation flawlessly, but my capabilities were much greater. I think something that I have noticed as like a change in our industry is that people are looking for people with a range of skills and interests in different types of creative processes. So I'm an animator, but I'm also an illustrator, and they want, you know, my bosses regularly check in with me and say, do you want to do type design? It doesn't really look like you're interested in that. But I think, yeah, being able to find people who are really open to like having you grow and having you change is something that I'm really grateful that I found, but I didn't think would always be there for me. And I wanted to be such a skilled animator when I started. And now I realize that those types of people who are extremely skilled, but in one thing, but aren't really interdisciplinary, they're much more interchangeable than someone who can think creatively and someone who can do multiple things. Like those types of creatives tend to be more valuable for small studios with fewer hands. So I think there is going to be a trend as studios are trying to cut their teams down, just like due to the economy. I think there will be a trend towards interdisciplinary designers and creatives.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that there's a lot more mini agencies or mini production companies these days, and they are looking to like run projects more minimally. So there's a lot more scrappiness than traditional like Hollywood hierarchies and X, Y, and Z. So I do think that there's a lot more value today for the person that can do multiple things, wear multiple hats. And as much as that might, yeah, you might run into like Mary running into like, oh, you're not like the best and like perfect assistant editor who knows all the things and, you know, or whatever, then I don't know. I don't want to work for those people. Yeah, being diverse, I think is really important. And I think the program at U of O was really good at doing that and getting you to at least dabble in all the boxes.
Yeah, I super agree with that. At my studio, it's like around a dozen people, depending on the time, and everyone does different things. We have a software dev who's also our sound guy, and he does like orchestration for some of our apps and writes music. When we hired one of our recent, another software dev recently, I saw she had a creative writing degree, and I was like, hell yeah, that's our girl. She'll fit right in. Just everyone like has different skill sets. And even when I was touring different studios when I was still in school and trying to get a sense of like what are the backgrounds of different devs, I went around to a bunch of little studios in Portland, and I only found like a couple software devs at like creative studios that had actual like computer science degrees, because it's not really what people are interested in at these like creative institutions. So on a completely different note, another really cool change that's happening, which on a different scale, is this is tangential to the fields I work in, but there is a reckoning in the museum world with some stuff, as there are in a lot of industries. But you hear stories every day about like people in power, being abusive or holding racist beliefs, or specifically, I'm thinking about a client we had for the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, which you think would be a stand-up institution based on their name, but they had to do a major shakeup because a bunch of their staff who were Black and Indigenous made complaints that they were not being treated very well. And also they apparently had like a tacit agreement with some Christian organizations who like would come in and have tours that like We're just gonna like hide the marriage equality exhibit while you're here. We'll just put a curtain up or something. So there's a big shakeup over there, which is, it's crazy to think that like happens at a institution that should stand for, human rights. But there's a lot of discussion about what museums should be right now, and I think it's there's an international museum organization, ICOM, I can't remember what it stands for, which is having this discussion. I think it started in 2019. I don't know where it's at now, which is talking about changing the definition of what a museum is in their eyes. From like a really technical, like an institution that like takes care of artifacts and presents them to a public, basically, to a more active, like an institution that like has to work towards social justice, toward that like has a that like has to fight for environmental justice, just all these different things. This idea that museums are not neutral as an entity is gaining a lot of steam, and it's going to it's going to be an uphill battle, but it's really, really exciting to see.
That's super interesting. Disjecta right now has a kind of a fascinating show that dives a bit into that, like all these artists critiquing like museums that have stolen cultural artifacts from, all these different places in the world and cultures, and Mauritian Laghari has some great pieces in there. She was a visiting artist at UO a couple years ago. So if you're interested in that and you're in Portland, I think it's open through this weekend. Great, thank you. Okay, another kind of forward-facing question that could be interpreted that way is like, what are you working on now, or what you want to focus on in the near future in your careers or creative lives? And after this, we'll do the Q&A. So, and I see there's questions are lining up, so we'll get to them. Thank you for asking.
I feel like it's so hard for me, and I think this might answer some other questions that are in the chat. It's really hard for me to put a ton of energy into creative projects outside work, because I do a lot of really creative stuff at work, which is super fun. But then by the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to draw until I'm paid to draw. Like, you can't make me draw. But I think as far as like future projects go, things that I've really enjoyed working on outside of work would be like music, working with musicians and other creative people to do like collaborative projects. I love that. And I'm doing some more music video projection stuff for one of my favorite clients, Japanese Breakfast, really soon, which is really exciting. They're an amazing client to work with. They're so creative and friendly. So I really love working with them. I hope to do more stuff like that. I'm just like begging that like all the musicians I know to like let me do music videos with them. But then again, that type of thing takes a lot of time. So I think like in the future, I really want to do more narrative animation. That's kind of was my first love in school. And now that I feel like I have more developed skills, I feel like I could more efficiently direct something like that, and that is hopefully something I will do in the near future. It's definitely still my big love.
Yeah, I would kind of jump onto that as well. I think telling stories, or the narrative arc, is something that I'm hoping to get more in tune with. I love the process of storytelling, and I think also, to piggyback into what Carly was just talking about, I think stories are a super important way to bridge empathy gaps today, and that we are, as artists, communicators, and kind of that we can act as the medium for which communities come together and build more connection and compassion. And I'm not really sure where I'm going to tap into stories like that. And it's kind of funny as an editor, it's like I'm at the mercy of people having already shot that stuff. But I think putting it out there and recognizing that there is more and more need for it, just in like a starvation sense, I think that the telling stories to connect people is a really important thing that I want to start focusing on in the future.
So I actually have a pretty major career shift coming up. As I mentioned, I have done a lot of work on like science communication, in particular that program I briefly showed was a bit of foreshadowing. Because this fall, I am going to the University of Michigan for geospatial data science, in environmental science in particular. I want to go study environmental science and work on UX problems in basically connecting scientists with the public, because in working on a lot of these projects, I realized just the multitude of problems there are that exist. Even getting designers to talk to the scientists is just fascinating to watch. There's just such a different understanding of what a graph can be and how it functions. And the knowledge gap between like us in the design world and in the science world, it's such a high barrier to entry. And I've been so frustrated with like not understanding what the scientists are saying that I just had to go to grad school about it. Yeah, I'm moving to Michigan in a few months and I'm super excited. I really want to I just want to like force all these scientists to just think about design in a different way. And there's also a human-centered design program at University of Michigan too. So I want to go talk to those folks. So
awesome. Congrats.
Exciting. Thank you.
That's great. All right. Thank you all. We have quite a list of questions here. So we'll just kind of go down there and hope we get to as many as we can. You know, we'll have like another half hour here or so. So just start with the first one that came in. Just wondering what you feel is the best way to put, and we can all answer this, or like one person can take it. It doesn't have to be like but you know, however you want to do. Just wondering what you feel about the best way to put it together: portfolio, website, Instagram, etc. What are some key aspects to include too that employees will appreciate? Thanks.
We just went through a huge hiring round, so I've looked at like 1 million recent grad portfolios. I think one, if you want to apply somewhere, you need a website. So everyone needs a website, portfolio, or even just like, you know, a Tumblr, like it doesn't have to be your own domain name, just like somewhere online they can go that isn't Instagram. You can get an Instagram to help get eyes on your stuff, but I would say it's completely secondary to portfolio. And I think that has changed, you know, in recent years. Way more emphasis on a website over Instagram. I think Instagram is highly saturated. Also, I think as far as like how you should look at your portfolio, come to us for portfolio reviews. But really it's brevity. Employers don't have, you know, 30 minutes to look through your portfolio when they're getting 100 applications. So all your best work up front, not like having to click and navigate through 1 million pages to find stuff. And we just want to see it. So lots of photos, lots of videos, less text. That's my advice.
Remember to hand them your resume when you go in for an interview. But remember, there's still a chance you might get hired if you forget to hand them your resume, because that happened to me. Don't come to me for advice on that, probably.
All right. So question from Mary. What was your most fulfilling class you took at the U of O in relation to the work you like doing?
Okay, well, I'm not going to say animation or a class from art and tech because Rick was my teacher for a lot of my classes, and I love Rick's class, and I work very closely with Rick all through school. So I highly recommend getting close with a professor who you trust and working a lot with them. But I think one of the most valuable classes that I took was my comic studies class. I did a comic studies minor and I loved it. And as I am a storyboard artist and I care a lot about story and sequence and illustration, taking a comic studies class really opened my eyes to a lot of creative writing and illustration styles and creative like visual storytelling that I don't think I would have been exposed to if I hadn't taken that class, because I was really in my own like bubble of artists that I like, artists I want to emulate, you know, artists that my art and tech professors know, but comic studies really helped broaden my horizons there. So.
Great, thanks. Next one's a question for Carly. I'm an art and tech major and computer science minor, and it's really inspiring to hear how you combine the two. Can you describe projects at your job where you've combined design and programming?
So many of them, all the time. Oh my God, that's my whole. That's a lot of my job. Honestly, the one I'm working, I can tell you about the one I'm working on right now, is for the Minnesota Zoo. We are teaching middle schoolers about moose conservation by letting them control a moose ecosystem and like what different factors can alter the population. So I have to like figure out what kind of math goes into like affecting the moose population, but also what is effective in showing that moose are being, like how many moose can you show and how do you show that they're dying in a way that's not upsetting to middle schoolers? And also how do you add trees to the ecosystem, but also is it okay that you can remove trees because we don't want to like give them the idea that deforestation is okay. Basically, my job involves a lot of rapid prototyping. So like, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin with this question. It's basically every project that I encounter. That's my whole job. And a lot of my job is trying to parse out what the designer is telling me in a way that can be approached logically by a program in a way that won't be super, super complicated and turn into like a massive logic, like we want to avoid intense logic trees because kids are going to use these and slam on the screens and there's all sorts of bugs that could come up. So my job is basically synthesis all the time. That is a very brief answer, but please email me if that's your degree combo, because we can have a chat.
Great, thanks, Carly. I think that they involve moose math in your answer, like is like the the best answer so far somehow. Yeah. Okay, next one. When applying for a job, they sometimes want you to see more professional work, such as advertising, poster or logos. How did you study more about career work when you were in the university?
When I was at U of O, I got a job at it used to be just marketing for the EMU, and it turned into broader student life. So I worked under full-time staff, like adult designers, graphic designers who had come to the U of O and would work on branding. So all the stuff you see in front of the health center or, you know, the rec center or, you know, all these different things around campus were our clients. So I actually got some professional training while I was in school working campus job, which I highly, highly recommend because you learn to take your art and like to do artistic things, not for yourself. I think that's really valuable. I know a lot of people loved taking some classes in the ad program just to kind of get like a taste for what advertising is like. But I also think that like advertising may not be everyone's cup of tea as far as creative work goes professionally. I think the ad program is really, really focused on like, big ad studios and ad campaigns. And I don't really do as much of that work as I thought I would be doing post grad. I'm doing a lot more like creative installation. So I think that you can supplement your art and tech experience with like a lot of different types of things that will help you understand clients and more branded work. But you could also make up your own clients, make posters for made up events, stuff like that, if you're looking to get more professional work that's less creative on your portfolio.
Great, thanks. All right. How do you avoid getting stuck in gig jobs in this day and age of young professional? In this day and age, a lot of young professionals get stuck doing smaller jobs for short amounts of time, like working for Fiverr or Upwork or any small contracts job. While it works great for some people, it feels like an unsteady, uncertain situation to be in.
I can kind of speak to it. I haven't worked for any of the like upstart fever people, but being freelance is definitely uncertain at times, can be unsteady at times. It's funny because I think it's a challenge balancing it and approaching it. And I've turned to like positive mental health exercises. It's kind of funny, but like meditation and exercise and making sure to, this is kind of getting off hand, but making sure to take breaks and take care of my mental health is really important within those short stints of jobs that are hectic, or in those sometimes longer stints of not knowing when the next job's coming. And that's when I start my full-time networking. But I think it's really important to be on top of your emotional and mental health as it is uncertain. And even having a full-time job probably has a lot of uncertainties and mental and emotional stresses too. So I don't know about actually getting stuck in it, but it's definitely a process.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people love freelance work because it affords you a lot of flexibility. It can pay really well. I think for me, it was like a little too stressful because I was kind of thrown into freelance work when I didn't want to be doing it. So I was like, I need a full-time job as soon as I can find one. But in college, I actually did do a lot of Fiverr work, which I don't regret because it has made me the artist I am today. But generally, Fiverr is just, freelance work where there's a middleman taking a cut. And so it provides a steady flow of jobs, but ultimately you're going to get underpaid if you work solely through Fiverr. So I think it's more about like getting stuck in a freelance cycle and looking for a full-time job if you don't want to be stuck in a freelance cycle. But I think freelance works for a lot of people, and it's going to be, I think looking for a full-time job, whether or not that's going to be extremely creative or like extremely like your dream job, whatever that means, I think that is for some people and it's not for other people. But I do think that it's kind of the only way to get out of the uncertainty of the infrequency of freelance work is like sometimes nabbing a great job and sometimes settling. And then while you're at that job that may not be perfect, working on building up your portfolio to get a more ideal job for yourself.
Great. Next question. How do you maintain a good work-life balance / separation when many digital projects can be worked on outside of paid time?
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't work outside paid time.
Yeah, just like track all of your work hours, because I freelance on the side of my full-time job. So I'm often working outside of my 9 to 5. And it's so hard to do more work on top of your 9 to 5. And I'm helping friends with passion projects. So I find myself working on weekends. And so I think like more than maintaining a good work-life balance, because I think that looks different for everyone. Some people love working late into the night, some people don't. I think it's learning to say no and learning to understand your own bandwidth and not taking on more jobs than you feel comfortable working.
Yeah, it's definitely unique to each person. I would agree. Like my boundaries for work-life balance is I really, like I said, I need to take breaks, go for little walks, and it's not like, oh, I'm gone for 2 hours during the day, but it's just taking a walk around the block, and separating myself from that screen or that grind, and then being conscious about when I'm tapping into emails or the work sphere, because I work from home. It's and now everyone's kind of working from home, but I was working from home for the last 7 years, and it's just being really intentional about creating separation between your life and your work. And definitely there's some bleed over, but um, you'll everyone will define that boundary as they go, and it's okay to get overwhelmed sometimes and reassess, and it's okay to feel underwhelmed sometimes and pick it up, and that's those steps.
Yeah, I was a lot more likely to work overtime when I was first starting out, and just was like a little obsessive over projects and was like, but I need to fix this thing. Who cares if I go over hours? But after a while, you just learn to let go, because it has effects on your mental health if you keep that up. So you just gotta learn again what your balance is, and that is different for everyone.
Great, thanks. You kind of already touched on this on your answers about narrative and career changes, but this, you could take this even broader, I guess, too. What are each of your own long-term personal artistic aspirations?
My artistic aspirations are in hibernation mode right now, partly because of the pandemic. I have no creative juice at all, but also like I'm really excited to like focus in and like on some science and like explore a whole new world. And actually, when I was in undergrad, a lot of my art was inspired by data and by some of the like data science classes I took in computer science. So I'm kind of expecting to be re-inspired in that way, but I'm going with the flow in terms of long-term artistic inspiration or goals.
That's awesome. I think, yeah, what you said is allowing yourself to go through moments of not being inspired, and that doesn't mean that you're no longer creative or you weren't ever going with it at school or whatever. And letting those kind of random sparks of inspiration just show up out of nowhere, and trusting that intuition. I was feeling creatively uninspired recently, and then I remembered this random project that I wanted to do in college, where I was going to make little sculptures of barnacles and put them around the city, just random places. I don't know what it was about, but I never did it. And then I just remembered it, and it's like sparked this whole little side tangent of creative juice. And so I think, in terms of my aspiration, my artistic process aspirations, is I want to like give myself the grace to ebb and flow, and when I feel those sparks, to follow them and see see where they lead, whether it's professionally or just personally.
Yeah, I feel like it's so hard to like look so far into the future, because I used to be like, what do I want to make? And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a big project. I don't really have the bandwidth. I think just like in the future, someday, I guess creative bucket list, I'd love to direct a music video, animate a music video, assemble a team. I recently had a friend, the passion project I'm helping out on, which I don't have bandwidth for, but I'm doing anyway, is a close friend of mine who just pulled all of her design friends, animation friends. She's really well networked down in LA, which is where I met her. And she said, I want to make a trailer for an animated short that I'm trying to get funding for. Would y'all all contribute 20 hours of your time and help me make this a thing? And we have, and it's probably like the most beautiful animated thing I've ever worked on. So someday roping in people to help me on a project like that would be awesome. And ideally being able to pay them for that work too. But I think, yeah, eventually just like getting to actualize an animated project that might be bigger than just me would be really exciting. I think like stage design and set design is really interesting to me. So something like that.
Interesting. Well, you just kind of touched on this, Mary, but the next question is, how has collaboration expanded each of your creative practices?
Outsourcing. I love outsourcing work. I love not having to animate when I don't want to. I love being able to just like pay a friend or ask a friend to help me animate something if I don't have the time or energy to do it myself. So I think collaboration, and also being able to like not be so precious with work that like everything has to have your hand on it, I think has allowed me to make projects that are just like much greater than something that I would be able to do myself. So it takes a lot of trust. It takes like knowing the right people and trusting those people and being excited to work with those people. But I think like collaboration has, even just like in work, like the stuff I do at my office is something I could never do on my own. So it's so exciting to be able to collaborate with people, and just it's the payoff is incredible. So I think that it's just made me more excited to collaborate in the future on my own personal work and make it like less personal work. Doesn't have to mean it's only you. So I think that's an exciting realization I've made in collaboration.
Yeah, I love working with people who have no like background in programming whatsoever, because they suggest for like a programming based project, because they suggest the weirdest stuff. They have no like, because the farther you go down programming knowledge, the more like confined your creativity gets to a certain set. And I guess it expands in a different way, but like having someone who's coming from a completely different context, just like, it's the most refreshing feeling there is. So, and I think that's true across like disciplines, of just talking to people who have completely different backgrounds from you is just the most refreshing experience.
All right. Thanks. Do you have recommendations for how to find opportunities with small design studios or startups?
Google spreadsheet. I made a Google spreadsheet of every studio I want to work at, and every time I need a job, I look at that thing and I email everyone on the list until someone writes back. It's the best recommendation I can give.
Yeah, to that effect is, sorry, Carly, were you gonna go? To that effect is, I again, full-time networker, sending, yeah, similar to have a list, and I just send out any recent work. And when I was a recent grad, I only had a couple portfolio pieces, really, namely one that I was like, okay, this defines what I want to do. And so I sent it out to that whole list, and I heard back from probably no one or a few. But the key is coming back a second time, giving it some time for them to respond. Everyone is really busy in the industry, and I didn't believe that. But now that I'm in it, I'm like, oh, I get it. They don't really have time to answer this email. So I'd say ping them again politely, just say, hey, I sent you a work from my recent portfolio graduation. Did you get a chance to look at it? Would love your feedback. Would love to connect and understand how your guys' workflow goes or whatever. And after that second email, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people wrote back and they're like, hey, so sorry, wanting to get to this. Your work looks awesome. How about coffee or something like that? And it's not a job, but it's the next step. And then it's crazy how 2 years later, those turn into jobs, or then the next day, those turn into jobs. But more, my approach is to build community. And I think that's the key, is you just want to connect with them because you admire their work and you're interested in who they are.
Yeah, in some ways it's easier now because everyone is available to Zoom. When I was researching grad schools, I would just send out so many cold emails, just like, talk to me about this, let's Zoom. And figuring out like that you can just send cold emails to strangers is just opens up a whole new world. The biggest piece of advice I would give is you could just ask people to talk about themselves to start out with, because everyone wants to do that. Just like, and it's really interesting to hear about different people's experiences and asking it from like a perspective of, can you tell me about your experience when you were first starting out? Like, we'll both give you an insight to how they got their start, and we'll like get your foot in the door of like talking about like industry stuff. So yeah, it takes some practice, but it's fun.
Okay, going down the list here, and I'm gonna already say I'm sorry we're not gonna get to all these great questions, but we're just gonna run out of time here. But thank you for submitting those. Do you feel like the artistic work you do is very meaningful, and how do you maintain confidence in your work style in the midst of so many other artists out there?
I'm 1 in a million, baby. Just kidding. You know, when I do run into other artists who share my style, or someone messaged me the other day, I got a text from like multiple friends who were like, did you make a Dunkin' Donuts commercial? Because I swear that I saw your art on a Dunkin' Donuts commercial. And it's like, wow, am I that unoriginal that people are, you know, everyone can do the same style? And I think that is kind of hard to hear, but I do feel like the work that I make for myself is very meaningful. I wouldn't necessarily say all the work I make at my studio that is directly related to selling product. I'm not going to say that's always meaningful. Sometimes like an inspiring project will run through the door or come through the door, or one that like, you know, is linked with a value or a cause that I feel really strongly about. So that's exciting. That feels somewhat meaningful. But I think when I make work for myself, I do feel like it's meaningful because I feel like I'll be able to connect to other people like me. And I think maintaining confidence in my work and my style, like amidst other artists, is just that I feel like my ideas are strong. And so even if my technical work doesn't really outshine everyone else's, I do feel like I'm clever. And also, I don't always care too much about what other, you know, there's a million other artists on the globe making really cool work. If I compared myself to them every day, I would never get anywhere. And so I think just kind of like focusing in on your own work, what inspires you, what makes you want to make work, is the best thing you can do for your creative growth, and not just constantly comparing yourself to other people who might have more experience, who might have been working on a collaborative project. You just don't really know other people's work as well as you know your own. So I'd say try to like focus in on your own artistic growth. And that's how I stay confident, is when I can tell that, you know, when I make something I feel really good about, that's good enough for me.
Okay, thank you. Here's one. They feel like the art and tech major is so broad. How and when do you choose a specific interest to focus on? How do you communicate that to faculty? To me.
I think the broad aspect of the major is what I loved about it, and then also going into the field, what Mary echoed was that having a broad spectrum of skills and interests is valuable. So that's important. I didn't really focus on video editing specifically until my last year. And I focused then out of happenstance, partly Rick and I connected to build a portfolio building class, and in that I started to focus because I wanted some work to share when I was out. That was in what I wanted to do, which was action, sports, film. And so I think just vocalizing it, I was surprised. Rick and I just started a conversation because he sat down at a picnic table, and that moment led to probably where I am today. So it just be open to connecting with the faculty, because they're there to help you, to encourage you, to see you grow. So trust that.
Yeah, I feel like all the faculty that I worked with, at least, were really good about everyone in the class, like noticing trends in their work. So if you're really interested in working with the faculty and like developing a closer relationship so they can always keep an eye on your work, it's kind of on you. I mean, they're already there. Like Rick is, always in his little studio. So they're there to support you. And I think that, yeah, just being confident enough that you are going to show up on your side and make work and let them know that you're passionate. That's enough for a lot of the professors to help, take you under their little wing, because they really do. They will encourage you to make your best stuff. And I think just like don't take, if you don't want to do 3D animation, you never want to do it, don't take 5 3D animation classes. Don't keep pushing it. Take one of every class and then really like take the ones you like more, but don't like force something if it's not for you. And I think your teachers they won't be offended if you're not taking their classes. They'll be excited for you.
And if you're having trouble deciding between multiple things, figure out how you can combine them.
Nice.
There's always ways.
Nice, thanks. Okay, how can you make the most out of your internship?
Work really, really hard the whole time you're there. That's my only advice. I never had an internship, but I had a job when I was starting, and I just like worked my tail off and tried to do the best that I could.
Yeah, and also like it's a learning experience. They know you're an intern, so you're not coming in as like, oh, I'm the best at this, and you're gonna pay me all this money. And so it's okay to use it as like a moment to ask a lot of questions, to dabble, and then in a physical working environment, to go to other people's desks that you wouldn't normally work with and just get to know other people and what they're doing, because it can build not only that network, but also just you get to know who's 1 degree off of where you're working from, and that's really valuable.
Yeah, I super agree on that last point, especially like if you have the opportunity to shadow other people. There are a lot of roles that like I did not know existed until I actually started like interning, and I was like, oh, who knew? It's fascinating to see how different studios function.
Great, thanks. I think this will be probably our last one here. This is an interesting question here. What is your creative process like when designing, creating for a cultural group / ethnicity that is different from you? What are some things to keep in mind?
I think about this question a lot. I try really hard to, I don't really know how to phrase this exactly, but I try really hard not to make work that's not meant for people like me. And oftentimes I can't control that depending on the client. So I try to put on my little like consumer hat and try to think what the consumer would like to see. But there's not a lot of points in my career where I am making stuff that's like specifically for so sometimes my bosses will say, not my bosses, but the clients will be like, you, Mary, with you and your fashionable clothes and you're on TikTok, you are our ideal audience. And so we need you to speak more to this work, because we're just like a bunch of old farts and we don't understand anything about what we're making. And I really value when clients and my bosses like have the clarity to recognize that. And I hope that when I work for projects where I'm not the client, where I'm not the ideal consumer, that I am able to open my eyes and say, okay, how can I involve someone who would be able to speak better to this type of work? Because I don't really find it appropriate to be making work that could be culturally insensitive. I just try to be really thoughtful about that. And it's not always going to be possible to rope in someone who could give cultural advice. And that's a huge issue in our industry. So I think just trying to be really sensitive when I can be, and trying to also force my foot in the door when I know when I should be in the room. And then trying to encourage our superiors to be more open to letting more people in the room, so that, everyone's accurately represented and spoken to in advertising.
I honestly don't know if this has ever come up for me. One similar situation that has come up is creating accessible technology for people who are either hard of hearing or deaf or visually impaired or blind. There's a lot of research and user testing that goes into it. They're experts in the field. They're consultants you can hire and there are standards and practices. Of course, there's not the equivalent for talking to certain racial groups, of course, but like it is a very involved process that takes a lot of empathy and a lot of for me, especially for designing for people who are visually impaired, because my whole frame of reference is like seeing the world, especially when it comes to like touchscreen experiences, learning to like shift my experience of a project into a like audio medium, and to like be able to navigate it through a screen reader just makes my understanding of a project so much richer. And it's really opened my world to like all different ways of experiencing media, in particular sonifying data. There's a way you can like play different musical notes to represent data, which is so rad, and like a whole different way of experiencing data, which like I never would have known about if I hadn't have like come across that. So it's something that that is like a point of pride for me, of like it's both fascinating and really important work, and makes the project stronger for everyone, I think, because more thought goes into it.
Oh, Rick, you're muted. You're muted.
It happened finally. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to do two things here at once. So we're right on time. So I'm gonna post the Adam Pikowski Ask Me Anything question, the session that's gonna be a drop-in session. You can switch over to that right now if you're watching. I want to thank you for the questions, y'all. Sorry we didn't get to all of them. But and I just want to super thank our panelists for being so generous of their time and being so brilliant and giving. And it's just like, for me as a professor, it's just like so like inspiring to hear and see your directions. I'm like so super proud of y'all and where you're going, and I'm just really enjoyed this conversation. And so thank you. And if you're going to be doing a visit with our panelists, maybe we've been going for an hour and a half, maybe let's just give them like a make sure you like allow a little break to like maybe a little stretch, a little 2-minute break. That might be a little late to this first session. So thank you, everybody. And thank you. And we'll see you online.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.